Okay, in this tutorial, I'm going to outline the differences in development that exist in the world, especially between countries. But before I look at 7 differences and look at maybe countries in the less developed world as we might know them versus the more developed world, this photograph taken from one city actually kind of highlights those differences within one photograph. So in the foreground, we can see what we would call a shanty town, where people live lives on the edge, and life is very difficult for all numbers of reasons. Whereas in the background, we can see a photograph of skyscrapers with high-rise living, and the people who live and work here will experience life in a very different way from the people in the foreground. So what I'm going to do is go through each of the images and describe what we're looking at, get you to think about what differences you're seeing, and then I'll ask you to write a descriptive paragraph about that photograph and then move on to the next one. Okay, so let's have a look at the first difference that we might see in the world. And here we can see a photograph of a sort of typical rural village in sub-Saharan Africa. And in the background, we can see the housing structures that these people will live in. In the foreground, you can see a typical housing area that you might find in the United Kingdom. Now, think about the differences in the actual buildings that we live in and how that affects our life, how these differences actually lead to different outcomes in our lives, in terms of how well they're built and how well they protect us, and the different things that you'd be expected to find in your home versus this housing here. Think about the fact that there is no roads apparent here. There's certainly no cars. There's no electricity lines leading in. In contrast, we can see people's cars in their driveways connected up to roads. People's homes have electricity and so on and so forth. So there's the first kind of visible difference in development. Clearly, the people living in this part of the world have a very different life and experience of life from this person here. And there's other little subtle things you can see in this photograph. So for example, you can see bins here, wheelie bins, which obviously get collected on a weekly basis. Now think about what happens in this person's life and how that is different. Okay, let's move on. So that's the way we live. Let's have a look at this next difference, which is another aspect of how we live. And I've put these 2 contrasting photos to show the extremes of a life of luxury. So this is an idea of, you know, when you're on holiday, and think about it, the very fact that you have a holiday tells you something about your life, that you can afford to have time off from working, and the fact that you'll eat out lots and people will bring you the food to your table when you eat at a restaurant. And what does that require? Well, that requires incomes and savings, and the ability to fly abroad. And then look at the contrast with this child's life and what they don't have, and that is the exact opposite of all the things that somebody going to this holiday resort would have. So the experiences in your life and the things you get to do and don't do will be very different. So you might want to think about some of those differences and describe them in your second paragraph. Okay, this third paragraph I've used to highlight the difference in the kinds of jobs that we do. So, and the potential health implications of the way we live. So here you can see somebody melting down metal just on an open fire, and obviously it's a form of recycling here, and they would be inhaling a lot of pollution, and it's quite a dirty, dangerous job that they're doing here with very little protections. And then you think of this factory workplace where they're using machines, first of all. So there's a big difference there. And you can see that they've got aprons on, and that it's an organized place of work. So very different in terms of the type of job that these people are doing. Even though they're also manufacturing something, the way they approach it is very different from the way this person is manufacturing something. Right, let's have a look at our next difference. So the way we produce food. And this really highlights a big difference in development. So here we can see a woman using a stick to open up the ground, which she's no doubt going to try to plant some crops in, and she's doing it all by hand. Here we can see a machine being operated by one person covering a huge area of land very rapidly to grow crops, which we can see in the background. So there's not just a difference in the speed at which somebody can do work to do with the difference in technologies, but then as a consequence, the amount of food that people can produce, which in turn will affect the income of these two people, of this person in the tractor and this woman here, and also therefore the futures of their respective families to do with how much they can earn from agriculture. And why is she resorting to have to farm this way? Why is he able to farm this way? So what's maybe causing those differences? So a big difference in development in these two contrasting pictures. So write a paragraph that describes the difference you can see and how it might affect the lives of these two people. Right, the sixth difference, I put this one in because it highlights the inside of our homes and the different way we live our lives. So in this case, I've got a kind of a kitchen, a modern kitchen that you might find in a house in the UK, with a cooker powered by gas that's piped in from outside with electric lighting, and a fridge over here that's keeping the food cool, and it's climate controlled home, and it's nice and clean and hygienic. And here we have an open fireplace, so this person's heating their food on a fire using wood they've collected. There's no kitchen surfaces. It's being done outdoors, although it could be done indoors, I guess. The materials they're using to cook, we can see. There's a difference in hygiene level. There's a tap in the background here with water that's piped in. Where's this person getting their water? Well, there's a little bowl that they've collected the water in, but where's that water come from? So big differences in development. Now, it's not just the kitchen you would maybe expect to see that difference, but if you think through your whole home, in what ways is your actual home very different and show a very different level of development in the way you live to the way that people are living in this community? Okay, so write a paragraph describing the differences shown there. And your last paragraph, second last paragraph, I've put this one in to show healthcare. So here we have a rural health clinic in rural Africa. So I found this picture, so a very typical hospital that you'd get access to in maybe somewhere in Malawi. And here's an image of a hospital in the United Kingdom. So in what way might healthcare be different? How easy would it be people to get access to healthcare from the moment they're born to the moment they die? What will be the training of the person working in this health clinic? And if you are unwell, what are the chances of your illness being diagnosed and being treated with the correct medicines? And what's the difference here? And when we think about those differences, how would those differences affect the quality of people's lives in these two countries? And the final images, contrasting images, is a typical school in a sub-Saharan African country. So if we do a quick little count of the children you can see in front of you, you're probably looking at 60, 70 pupils. There's a traditional blackboard with chalk, and the kids are sitting on the floor, and a lot of them have got no form of pencil, jotters, or anything. Here we have a typical classroom for the United Kingdom. We've got about 30 students. They've all got their own little clusters of desks. We've got an interactive smart board here. The kids have got their own pens, mini whiteboards. So we've seen two very different learning environments. So the way young people are learning here and learning here. So what is the difference in these two schools, and how might that affect the futures of these young people in these two different classrooms? Okay, so that's the final photograph. What I'd like you now to do for each one of them is make sure you've written a paragraph that describes the difference, at least has one descriptive sentence of the differences you can see between the two photographs, and suggests how those differences might affect the lives of the people that you're seeing in that photograph. Okay.